Hey guys, Dimension Master Studios here. How y'all doing? I'm coming at you guys with another tier list video, this time going over Ninjago villains, because there's a lot of villains when it comes to the show, and I want to give you guys my ranking of every Ninjago villain. So here's going to be every Ninjago villain that I'm going to be talking about. When it comes to the tier list that I found, it includes Lloyd, but I'm not going to be ranking him with the other villains because he wasn't really a villain. Also, Garmadon was put on the tier list twice, and I get why, because this Garmadon is meant to be pre-Season 8 Garmadon, and this is the Garmadon post-Season 8, but I'm only going to be talking about Garmadon once, so I'm only going to be ranking this Garmadon, not this Garmadon. They're going to be the same character. And before we get into anything else, I just want to quickly go over the tiers. S tier is going to be for my favorite villains in the show. A tier is going to be for the villains who I really like. B tier is going to be for the villains that I think are good. C tier is going to be for the villains that I think are okay. D tier is going to be for the villains who I don't like. And finally, E tier is going to be for my least favorite villains. So let's get into this whole thing. Starting off with Samukai, I'm going to put him in B tier. I think that Samukai is a pretty solid character. It was interesting seeing the stuff that happened during the pilot season. I think it's cool that he was the first Ninjago character to ever have 4 arms. That was definitely cool. Plus, his and Garmadon's dynamic is also really interesting. Plus, I also like that Samukai was able to return during Day of the Departed. That was definitely really nice. I just wish that we got a chance to see Samukai more during the show. But for the stuff that we got, I definitely liked it. Up next, we have Garmadon, and Garmadon is an easy S tier for me. Garmadon is one of my favorite villains and characters when it comes to the show, mainly just because of the journey that he's gone through over the course of the show, with him going back and forth between being a hero and a villain. I think that's really interesting, and I really enjoyed seeing what happens to Garmadon over the course of the show with this stuff, especially during the Oni trilogy, where he was a full-blown villain all throughout the trilogy. That wasn't until the end, where he started to go down the path of becoming a good guy again. That was definitely nice. And it was cool to see Crystallize continue on with this idea, with Garmadon wanting to become a good person. That was definitely really nice. And just overall, when it comes to Garmadon, again, he is absolutely amazing. Up next, we have Scales, and I'm going to put Scales in B tier. It was nice seeing the stuff with Scales during the first few seasons of the show, with him starting off as a villain, but then during Rebooted, we saw him and the other Serpentine become good guys. That was definitely something interesting to see. And it's nice to see him as an ally when it comes to Ninja, as we've seen a few times when it comes to the show, mainly during the Wildbrain era. And overall, when it comes to Scales, I think that he's a solid character, all things considered. After this, we have Pythor, and I am putting Pythor in A tier. What is there to say about Pythor that hasn't already been said? There's a lot of things to love when it comes to Pythor. There's his on-screen presence, there's the fact that he's funny, plus also intimidating at the same time, there's his multiple appearances over the show. There's just a lot of stuff to really like when it comes to Pythor. And again, there really isn't that much for me to say about Pythor that hasn't already been said. I mean, the guy's amazing. After this, we have the Great Devourer, and I'm going to put the Great Devourer in C tier. She was alright. She appeared a few times during the show, and I don't really have a lot to say when it comes to the Devourer. Again, she was just okay, I think. Same thing goes when it comes to Soto. I'm also going to be putting him in C tier. He's just an okay character, I think. I enjoyed the stuff they did with him during Skybound, giving him a connection to Nauticon. That was definitely something interesting, but that's really all I can say when it comes to him. Up next, we have Kozu, and I'm going to put Kozu in D tier. I don't really have a lot to say about Kozu. Like, he has 4 arms, which is cool, and he has a all right design. Like, that's pretty much all I can give him, really. Up next, we have the Overlord, and I'm putting the Overlord in S tier. I really like the Overlord. I like the idea of the Overlord being this immortal being of darkness who wants to corrupt Ninjago and take it over. That I think is really cool. Plus, I think it's also cool seeing him appear multiple times over the show as this massive threat that the ninja have to defeat. That is definitely really cool, and I definitely enjoyed seeing him again during Crystallize. And I think a lot of things for the Overlord during Crystallize were done really, really well, mainly his voice work, but also the battles that he was involved with. Mainly the one where he fought against Sensei Wu. That fight was amazing. After this, we have Cryptor, and I'm going to put Cryptor in B tier. I like that when it comes to Cryptor, he's basically meant to be an evil Zane, essentially, with him being a lot more sarcastic and talking a lot during battle, and also just making fun of his opponents. That's definitely interesting. Plus, Cryptor also has some pretty funny moments when it comes to the show, mainly whenever things involve Mindroid, and just overall, again, I just think that Cryptor is a bit of a funny character. After this, we have Chen, and I am putting him in A tier. For me, when it comes to Chen, I really like the fact that he's a more comedic villain when it comes to the show, and he is definitely able to make me laugh a lot. But at the same time, Chen can also be really intimidating when he needs to be, and that is definitely something interesting. Plus, at the same time, when it comes to Chen, I like the fact that he's the one who's responsible for a bunch of things happening when it comes to the show, mainly the Serpentine War, and that led to a lot of other things happening when it came to the show, which is definitely pretty interesting, all things considered. And just, yeah, I really like Chen. After this, we have Klaus, and I'm also going to put Klaus in A tier and slightly above Chen. And that's mainly just because of Klaus being a reoccurring character who shows up more, mainly during Skybound, where he was the one who found the Teapot of Tyran, and also the Dark Island trilogy, where he was the main antagonist. So that's really cool. Plus, there's also some other things about Klaus that I like. For example, his and Garmadon's rivalry, that's definitely really cool. Plus, also Klaus's use of magic, that's also something really interesting. And just, yeah, overall, I definitely really like Klaus. Up next, we have Moro, and I'm putting Moro in S tier. Moro is my favorite villain when it comes to the show. This guy is just awesome. I love his backstory and his connections that he has with Sensei Wu. That's definitely really nice. Plus, him being the master of wind is something that's really cool. He has a lot of really great moments all throughout Possession, and I really like his redemption storyline that he gets right at the end of the season. And I also like how this is continued during the events of Day of the Departed. That's something that is really cool, I think. And just overall, when it comes to Moro, again, this guy's my favorite villain, and he's one of my favorite characters in the show. After this, we have Ronan, and Ronan's a bit of an interesting case. For me, I like Ronan and I think he's a good character, but I wasn't the biggest fan of what happened to him during the island, and it wasn't him becoming a villain because that actually makes sense because Ronan's whole thing is that he's meant to be inconsistent. It's just that my issue with Ronan during the island is what he did, and that was obviously manipulating the keepers with a fake Wajira in order to get all their money. And that honestly felt like it was going a bit too far for Ronan, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. But again, overall, I do like Ronan, so I'm going to put him in B tier. Up next, we have the Preeminent, and I'm going to put the Preeminent in C tier. We never really got that much of a chance to see the Preeminent, but I think the concept is really cool with her being the physical embodiment of the Cursed Realm. That's definitely interesting. Plus, also the fight between her and Pixel during Season 11, it was alright. Up next, we have Nanakon, and I am putting him in A tier. I really like Nanakon. I think that he had a really great on-screen presence during the events of Skybound. That was great. Plus, I think it's also cool that when it comes to Nanakon, he's one of the very few Ninjago villains who the ninja never properly defeat. That's definitely really cool. Plus, I also like how when it comes to Nanakon, the way he ends up defeating the ninja is by putting them in these basically unwinnable situations, and the only way for the ninja to get out of them is to wish it all away. That is definitely really interesting. And just, yeah, overall, when it comes to Nanakon, I really like this guy. After this, we have the Mechanic, and I'm going to put the Mechanic in B tier. I think that the Mechanic is a bit of an underrated villain and character when it comes to the show, and there's definitely a lot of things to like about this guy. Mainly the fact that he's, well, a guy. When we were first introduced to him during the events of Skybound, he was just a regular prisoner who was also a cyborg. And something that I really like when it comes to the Mechanic is what we see him go through over the events of the show, mainly with him becoming a bigger deal as time has gone on, to the point that by the time Crystallize rolls around, he's on the Council of the Crystal King along with other major Ninjago villains like Pythor and the Skull Sorcerer. That's definitely really cool. That being said, though, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Mechanic during Crystallized, mainly with him fixating on the idea that Nia isn't a real hero without her powers, and the show doesn't do anything to prove him wrong about this. But by and large, I do still really like the Mechanic. After this, we have Yang, and I'm also going to put Yang in B tier. Just like the Mechanic, I think he's also a bit of an underrated character, all things considered. I like the fact that he was first introduced during Possession, and then he made a brief cameo during the events of Skybound, and then he was the main antagonist for Day of the Departed. That was definitely really cool. Plus, at the same time, when it comes to Yang, I think the dynamic that he and Cole have over the events of the special is really cool to see. Plus, I also think that Yang's motivation to be remembered is something that's really interesting when it comes to the show. And just, yeah, overall, when it comes to Yang, I think he's a bit of an underrated character, actually. After this, we have the Time Twins, and I'm putting Chronix and Crux in C tier. They're both okay characters, all things considered. I think the concept for them is pretty interesting, with them being evil elemental masters, but that's pretty much all I can say about them. There isn't anything super major that I can talk about when it comes to either one of them that I really like. Up next, we have Mr. E, and I'm going to put him in B tier. For me, I really like the concept for Mr. E, the idea that he's this silent assassin type character when it comes to Ninjago. That's really cool, and him being a red herring for the quiet one, that's also something pretty interesting. Plus, he does have some pretty good moments during the events of Season 8, and his death scene during Season 9 is a really good scene because it gives us a chance to see how evil Garmadon is now, and we can get a chance to see how strong he truly is, which is definitely really cool. I just wish that Mr. F could have been handled a bit better because he doesn't really get that much during Crystallized. After this, we have Kilo, and I'm going to put Kilo in C tier. For me, I wasn't the biggest fan of Kilo during Season 8, but he's grown on me as time's gone on, mainly when it comes to the Wild Rainer of the show, where he's had some pretty funny moments. And yeah, overall, when it comes to Kilo, I think he's an alright character. After this, we have Ultraviolet, and I'm going to put her in D tier. It's basically the same situation as Kilo, but in reverse, where, once again, I wasn't the biggest fan of Ultraviolet, but my opinion on her has gotten a lot more negative over time. To me, as time has gone on, Ultraviolet has just gotten more obnoxious, and I'm just not really that big a fan of her, all things considered. After this, we have Harumi, and for those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, then you know where this is going, and for those of you who are newer to my channel, I am putting Harumi in E tier. Harumi is my least favorite Ninjago character. I don't like Harumi. I think that Harumi is a really unlikable character, and she is a really poorly written character, and I did not like her during the events of Seasons 8 and 9. And I really didn't like what they did with her during the events of Crystallized, especially at the very end where she was given a redemption arc. I do not think that was handled well at all. And just overall, again, I really, really don't like Harumi. After this, we have Iron Baron, and I'm going to put Iron Baron in the top of C tier. For me, when it comes to Iron Baron, I think he's a bit of an underrated villain also, just like the Mechanic and Ying, although he isn't that good of a villain. You see, the thing that I really like when it comes to Iron Baron is how he relates into Season 9's message about power and how it can come in many different forms. For example, Garmadon's power comes from his strength, and Lloyd's power comes from his words. And the cool thing about Iron Baron is that he's meant to represent the opposite of this. He's meant to represent the illusion of power and something that could be there but isn't. That I think is a really cool idea. Plus, at the same time, when it comes to Iron Baron, I think it's really interesting that lies are the things that ultimately defeat him by the end of the season. That's a pretty cool touch, I think. After this, we have the Omega, and I am putting the Omega in E tier. To me, the Omega is the most boring character in all of Ninjago. His whole thing is just that he's evil and wants to conquer the 16 realms, and that is it. There is nothing unique or interesting about the Omega at all. Again, there really isn't anything that big for me to say when it comes to this guy, both positive and negative, other than just that he's boring and I don't like him. And that's really all I can say about this guy. After this, we have Asphira, and I'm going to put her in C tier. For me, when it comes to Asphira, I think she's an alright character. I think that when it comes to Season 11, her history that she has with Sensei Wu is interesting. Plus, I think it's also cool that when it comes to Asphira, she's the first major villain in Ninjago who knows Spinjitzu, who actively uses it against the ninja. That's pretty cool. But other than those two things, I really wasn't the biggest fan of Asphira during Season 11, but I did like what they did with her during the events of Crystallize by making her a more comedic villain. That was definitely something interesting, but that's really the only thing that I can give her. Up next, we have Vex, and I am putting this guy in S tier. I really, really like Vex. He is my favorite post-movie villain that we have gotten, and it's for a few reasons. For starters, I really like how Vex turned Zane into the Ice Emperor with his lies and manipulation. That is definitely really cool. Plus, I also like the fact that when it comes to Vex, the reason why he's doing everything during the Ice chapter is because he's paranoid and fearful towards the world. That's definitely something pretty interesting, and we haven't really seen that when it comes to a Ninjago villain. Plus, I think it's also cool how Vex is the true main antagonist of the Ice chapter, not the Ice Emperor. That's a really cool idea. Plus, I also really like Vex's punishment at the end of the season with him being banished, and this makes sense considering where Vex was before the season actually started, with him being in self-exile because he believed that everyone hated him, but now Vex is in exile because everyone does hate him. That's a really cool detail, I think. After this, we have the Ice Emperor, and I'm putting the Ice Emperor in B tier. For me, when it comes to the Ice Emperor, I really like the concept for him. The idea that he's one of the ninja who's turned evil, that I think is a really cool idea. The only real issue that I have with the Ice Emperor is that I really didn't like that Zane needed to have his memories erased in order to become the Ice Emperor. But really, other than that, I think that the Ice Emperor is a really cool character, actually. And over time, my opinion on this guy has gotten a lot more positive, actually. After this, we have Unagami, and I'm putting Unagami in A tier. There's a lot of really cool things when it comes to Unagami. For starters, I like the fact that when it comes to Unagami, he's this villain who's built up to over the course of the season, who the ninja only properly encountered towards the end of the season. And with Prime Empire being a video game focused season, that makes sense, and it's definitely something unique compared to other Ninjago villains. Plus, at the same time, when it comes to Unagami, I like the fact that he's basically Milton Dyer's son. That's definitely interesting. Plus, Unagami and Milton Dyer end up tying into Season 12's overall message about AIs and their creators. That's definitely something pretty interesting. And yeah, overall, when it comes to Unagami, again, I really like this guy. Up next, we have the Skull Sorcerer, and I'm putting the Skull Sorcerer in A tier. There's a lot of stuff that I like when it comes to this guy. For starters, I think that the Skull Sorcerer has the coolest design of any villain in the show. This guy just looks awesome. But that's not it. I also really like the Skull of Hazador and the idea that the skull is what gives the Skull Sorcerer all of his powers. That's definitely really cool. Plus, I also like how when it comes to the Skull Sorcerer, the reason why he's doing everything that he's doing is because of money. He wants to make money off the Benchstone that the Munsters and Geckos are mining in the mines. That I think is definitely interesting, and it sets him apart from other Ninjago villains. Up next, we have Chief Mamatus, and I'm going to put Chief Mamatus in B tier. I think that the Keepers overall are pretty underrated, and I wish we got a chance to see them more when it comes to the show. We got a chance to see them a bit during the island, and they made a few more cameo appearances after this, but I just wish we got a chance to see them more, because the concept for the Keepers, I think, is pretty cool. They've been charged with this mission by the first Ninjutsu Master himself in order to protect the Storm Amulet. That is definitely really cool, and again, I just wish that we got a chance to see more of these guys at some point. That would be nice. Up next, we have Calamar, and I'm putting Calamar in S tier. I really like Calamar. I think that his animation is really good. He has a great on-screen presence. I think his and Benthomar's dynamic that they have is really interesting with them being adopted brothers. I also really like his voice acting. I think that was done really well. And just, there's a lot of things about Calamar that I think are done really well when it comes to Seabound, and he was definitely one of the highlights of that season. Finally, we have Wajira, and I'm going to put Wajira in C tier. I thought that Wajira overall was okay. I think it's interesting that Wajira was first alluded to back during Season 8. That's definitely something pretty interesting. Plus, also the stuff that Wajira ends up doing during the final few episodes of Seabound. It was definitely really cool to see a lot of that stuff, but there isn't that much that I have to say when it comes to Wajira. Again, I think she's just okay overall. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. This is my tier list of Ninjago villains. So tell me down below, what do you guys think? What are your guys' rankings when it comes to Ninjago villains? Tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later, guys, this is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.